So, friends, this podcast started some years ago as a personal hobby. It has become a little more than that. Over the years of this podcast, I have basically done all of the work of the podcast by myself: show notes, recording, editing. But I'm grateful that I have a new partnership with Luke Clayton and the team at curated.co. They are helping me to produce each new episode of this podcast. So, this will, I hope, help us to publish on a more regular basis on Mondays, and will up the game on the quality of this podcast. Luke and his team does great work. I'd love to commend them to you. You can look them up again at increasecreative.co or find more information on the show notes of this episode. Check them out. This is the On Preaching Podcast with H.B. Charles Jr., the podcast dedicated to helping you preach faithfully, clearly, and better. Good day, friends. I want to extend a personal invitation for you to join us for the 2025 Cutting It Straight Expository Preaching Conference. I know that there are a lot of conferences, and if you track them all, you would almost be going to some conference every week. Why Cutting It Straight? Well, this conference is rooted in our burden to train, model, and promote faithful Bible preaching and teaching. We want to help young preachers and seasoned pastors to, as our title suggests, cut it straight. And so in September, there will be some faithful ministers of the word who will join me here at the Shiloh.Church as we minister to those of you who will join us. It is going to be a blessed time. There will be faithful models of expository preaching. There'll be lectures concerning the principles of how to get the text right and get the truth across. And then there'll be some hands-on workshops that will help you sharpen your skills in preaching. At the same time, you'll be blessed to be served by the wonderful saints of the Shiloh.Church, where I am privileged to pastor. And there'll be a lot of books you don't want to miss. Cutting It Straight 2025, September 23rd through the 25th in Jacksonville, Florida. You can register at cutstraight.org or at hbcharlesjr.com. I hope I'll see you then. In this episode of the podcast, I want to talk to you about some of my favorite commentaries on the book of Psalms. So throughout my Christian journey, as with most Christians, I don't think this makes me unique. I have lived with the Psalms. It has been throughout my entire spiritual journey in following Jesus. The Psalms have been a major part of my devotional life. And as a young preacher, I took shots at many different Psalms in my early days of preaching. But then I had a turning point, and I was able to take a class on preaching the Psalms. And that class was revolutionary for me. I determined from that class that the most faithful way to preach the Psalm is to preach a Psalm in its entirety. So not just Psalm 23, verse 4, but preach Psalm 23 in its entirety. And I don't know before that class if I had done much of that. Maybe a couple Psalms, but not much. And I recommitted to preaching every opportunity I could in the Psalms after that. And I did not take a shot at, preaching through the entirety of the book, all 150 Psalms, and either of the two pastorates I have served. But From my first pastorate into this pastorate, every summer we have had a summer psalm series. And some years I have had guests in to preach on a selected psalm of their choosing. And many of those years, I have used that as an opportunity to preach my way further into the book of Psalms. I, at the time of this recording, am in the midst of my summer psalm series here at the Shiloh.Church. And we've kind of pulled commentaries off of the shelf and put them on the cart to make them more accessible during this month of my study. And I've just pulled a few of my favorite commentaries on the Psalms. Some of these are not commentaries formally. They're books related to the Psalms that I am fond of. And these are not all. I recently did a episode of the podcast about commentaries on the book of Mark. And I learned a couple of books from that you mentioned to me in feedback that I was not familiar with, and then there were others that you mentioned to me that I share your appreciation for. I just didn't put them on the list. Wait, no one can pick your friends for you, and I have favorite friends. I have chosen my friends on the Psalms. These are not all the books I use or consult, but these are some of my favorite. Some of them are new to me, and some of them I have been using for a while. So let me just plunge in this episode and talk to you about some of the friends I have made on the book of Psalms. The first I'll mention is The Vitality of Worship by Robert Davison. I mentioned that I took a class on the Psalms some years ago, and the required text for that class was Davison's The Vitality of the Psalms. It's theological / devotional is how I describe it. It's a faithful overview of each psalm, and then it leans into the major theme and structure of the psalm. I wouldn't call it an exegetical thing. This is not like something you could just use by itself and be ready for the psalm, but it is a book that I can't imagine preaching through a psalm without consulting. It is The Vitality of Worship by Robert Davison. Secondly, some years ago, I got my hands on Roadmap for the Psalms by George Zimick. You need this book. You need this book. It is a full exegetical outline of every one of the 150 Psalms in full. It doesn't even have page numbers in this book. It's just lined up according to the 150 Psalms, and it is a full exegetical outline of each of the Psalms. No comment, but meaning is embedded in structure, and this book does well at helping you to see how the Psalms are structured, and it helps get toward the meaning of that psalm. So I would say if you are preaching through the Psalms, you need to get you a copy of George Zimick's Roadmap to the Psalms. I don't even think I bought this book. I think this book, when I was living in Los Angeles, one year, this book was given away for free, if I remember right, at the Shepherd's Conference at Grace Community Church. I got this book for free, and this is maybe one of the best steals I have ever had. George Zimick's Roadmap to the Psalms. Of course, there's a smaller 2-volume work by Derek Kidner, but Derek Kidner is classic on the Psalms. This is it's concise, so it's not extensive treatment, but man, Kidner gets to the heart of every psalm, the meaning and the main idea of each psalm. And there are exegetical and expositional nuggets that you will find. And this is something else that you should have in your library. Really, if it's commentary, I'm not just going to recommend Kittner on the Psalms. Kittner is a cat. I would just say, you should just get the commentaries that he writes. If I'm remembering correctly, he's got Proverbs as well. If you find Kittner doing commentary work, you should pick him up. But you should make sure you have Derek Kittner's commentary on the Psalms. The next thing I'll mention is a new commentary set by Christopher Ash on Christ in the Psalms. It's a 3-volume set, and the entire first volume is on Christ in the Psalms, and then the next 2 are commentary on the Psalms. It's new, and I've only been able to use it once or twice, but I've perused it. It is excellent. Somehow I had an extra copy of this set, and a friend of mine asked, he was working on the Psalm series, and asked, what would I recommend? And I just sent him this set. It has climbed up the list of one of my favorite works on the Psalms. It's virtually brand new, but I think it is going to, in the years to come, be regarded as one of the classic works on the Psalm by Christopher Ash. It's by Crossway on the Psalms in 3 volumes. Alan P. Ross in the Kregel exegetical commentary has a commentary on the Psalms. I think it's 2 or 3 volumes. Very exegetical, extremely helpful in his commentary on each verse in that psalm. And there is an emphasis as well that there are exegetical outlines about the structure of the psalm. It is done well. This is one of those things I'm going to read to make sure toward the end, I want to check my work, and one faithful sounding board about whether or not you are kind of coming at the psalm right is Alan P. Ross's A Commentary on the Psalms. There's another smaller, this is not commentary, but Dale Ralph Davis is publishing these small works through Christian Focus on the Psalms. So he has The Way of the Righteous in the Muck of Life on Psalms 1 through 12. I have him on Slogging Along in the Paths of Righteousness, Psalm 13 through 24. In the Presence of My Enemy, Psalm 25 through 37. And My Exceeding Joy, Psalms 38 through 51. He also, I have God's Rascals on the story of Jacob in Genesis, and Faith of Our Fathers, an exposition of about Abraham, Psalms 12 through 25. Dale Ralph Davis is excellent. He's another cat that if he's wrote it, you should buy it. You will benefit from it. But his work on the Psalms, as he's working through these shorter volumes, are excellent. I would commend them to you. Dale Ralph Davis. Another very exegetical commentary that I love is John Goldingay, the Baker Commentary on the Old Testament, Wisdom and Psalms. It's in, I think this is in 3 volumes as well. This is highly exegetical, probably even more so than the Alan P. Ross. And this is a good, if you want one like very exegetical commentary to check your work, if you had to pick one exegetically focused, I would recommend John Goldingay on the Book of Psalms. This is not a commentary, but I love John R.W. Stott's My Favorite Psalms. So I think he only deals with maybe 25 or 30 in this book, but he deals with his favorite Psalms. But in many instances, you'll share in agreement with him about those Psalms. And when I am preaching a Psalm, I go check to see if Stott has a commentary on that Psalm. And there are Psalms that I have preached because they were included. I had the assurance that Stott had commented on that Psalm in My Favorite Psalm. Do you read John R.W. Stott? His commentary, his books are excellent, and My Favorite Psalms has homiletical structure to them, but they're just devotionally rich. I would recommend Stott, My Favorite Psalms. Of course, I think my ordination papers would be suspended if I, in the midst of a list of favorite commentaries on the Book of Psalms, did not mention The Treasury of the Psalms by the Prince of Preachers, Charles Haddon Spurgeon. Man, what would we be if we had more commentary through books of the Bible by Charles Spurgeon? But his major life work is focused on the Book of Psalms. It is a rich, rich resource. And even to this day, you'll be hard pressed to find commentaries on the Psalms that are worth their weight that don't quote from the treasury of the Psalms by Charles Haddon Spurgeon. I think my favorite set on the Book of Psalms personally is James Montgomery Boyce's 3 volumes on the Psalms. It is an excellent resource. The James Montgomery Boyce was a great theologian, was a great author, and was a great preacher. And I think these 3 volumes on the Psalms are Boyce at his best. I think it might be fair to say if you took all my resources on Psalm and left me with Boyce, I'd be content with that. He is my favorite commentator on the Book of Psalms. There is a volume by Herbert Lockyer Sr., just called the Psalms, that you should add to your library as you preach through the Psalms. So these are not really, you may know the name Herbert Lockyer because he has a series of list books, all the men of the Bible, all the women of the Bible, all the parables of the Bible, all the miracles of the Bible. Those are helpful sets. Lockyer's book on the Psalms is somewhat unique because basically he is going from each verse in every Psalm and has some historical note and how this verse or this Psalm was used throughout church history. And you'll find there are a lot of A, great devotional nuggets in this book, and B, there's a lot of great illustration material out of church history from this resource. So I highly recommend Psalms by Herbert Lockyer. Walter Brueggemann, The Message of the Psalms. It's pitched as a theological commentary. So it's not really exegetical or homiletical or devotional. It's a theological commentary. But the reason I love it is that he organizes all of the Psalms under 3 categories. Psalms of orientation, where you are meeting the Lord, developing your relationship with the Lord. growing in the Lord. Psalms of disorientation, when there is sin or suffering or sorrow that kind of creates a rupture in your fellowship or confidence in God. And then Psalms of new orientation, where you've come to the other side of the trial, test, temptation, or trouble, and your testimony of God's goodness and faithfulness is renewed and restored. I think that's a wonderful way to think about the Psalms. There are Psalms of orientation, Psalms of disorientation, Psalms of new orientation. Walter Brueggemann's The Message of the Psalm. W. Graham Scroggie has a book called The Message of the Psalms. There's he really, in each one, kind of summarizes in a statement what he thinks the theme of that psalm is. It's a good overview of each psalm. It leans into some commentary, and is usually a good word there, section on the structure of the psalm. And you're just hard pressed to read any one of the psalms he treats there without maybe finding some quote that you said, man, that should go in the sermon. W. Graham Scroggie trained Stephen F. Olford, and Stephen Olford trained John Phillips. So he's just part of a long line and legacy of faithful exposition. And I'd recommend anything you can get your hands on by W. Graham Scroggie, but you should prioritize his guide to the Psalms. It is on my list, but I'll mention it here. The kind of train of exposition is Scroggie trained Olford, who trained John Phillips. John Phillips, Exploring the Psalm series, is a homiletical commentary. He has full alliterated outlines on each of the Psalms. And there's a whole exploring series of commentaries. I do think that John Phillips may be at his best in that series in his work on the Psalms. I think that's 3 volumes as well. So 2 or 3 volumes. You should pick up John Phillips Exploring the Psalms and just kind of check out the other sections of the Exploring series. I used his Exploring the Gospel of Mark as I preached through the Gospel of Mark. Helpful homiletical commentary. A Bend in the Road by David Jeremiah. This is not a commentary, but the expositor from California, David Jeremiah, went through some years ago a cancer battle, and he calls it a bend in the road. He tells the story of that experience, of that news breaking of his cancer diagnosis. And he basically starts with the Paul's thorn in the flesh. But the rest of that book basically is expositions of Psalms that he studied and I think he preached during this period of sickness and recovery. Woo! What a blessing. I'll also admit, there are Psalms that I have preached on the other side of reading David Jeremiah's A Bend in the Road. If you want to just kind of think through a series through on the Psalms, 6 or so pieces, check out A Bend in the Road by David Jeremiah. There's another new commentary that's pretty exegetical by James Hamilton in the Evangelical Biblical Theology. It is the Evangelical Biblical Theology Commentary. And I'm growing in my understanding and my convictions about and my affection for biblical theology that shows how all of the Bible connects and climaxes in Christ. And this is a newer commentary for me by James Hamilton, 2 volumes on the Psalms, and I've only really had a chance to use it just once. But I've already been really, my first impressions are very, very good. And James Hamilton is one of the great theologians and scholars of our day. And praise the Lord, he's not just writing theological works. He is writing biblical commentaries. And to do so on the Psalms is a gift to the church. You should add Hamilton's set to your commentary. Abraham Coravilla is a homiletician who teaches at Southern Seminary, and I just started reading him last year. I call him a contrarian. So there are some non-traditional views about preaching that he has, but his ideas are quite provocative, and you should read him. I read last year his manual for preaching. This year I have on my reading list his Privileging the Text. He also has a book called The Vision of Preaching. And one of Coravilla's focuses is that you should, in the text, study the semantics and the pragmatics. That's what he calls it. The semantics is what the author is saying. The pragmatics is what the author is doing. And his complaint about commentaries is that too many commentaries spend a lot of time on the semantics, what the author is saying, and not enough on the pragmatics. What is he doing? What is the authorial intent? What does the author mean by what he says? So he's been producing commentary. He also had commentary on Mark, I think on Genesis, and he has 2 or 3 volumes on the Psalms where he is writing the commentary from that perspective. Not just what the author is saying, but what is he doing? What is the point and purpose that the author is trying to communicate in the psalm? I think it's a helpful way to think about exposition and to treat the text. And I would commend to you any of those commentaries. They are refreshing to read, and you'll enjoy Coravilla on the Psalms. Maybe just one more, and permit me to say, I mentioned earlier, well, let's see. I do want to add Warren Wiersbe. Warren Wiersbe I picked up his stuff when I first became a Christian, and I have been reading him all of my ministry. He has a book called Meet Yourself in the Psalms, which is great, but he has 2 small commentaries on the entirety of the Psalms. One is called Be Worshipful, and the other is called Be Exultant. And man, if you're going to be blessed by the writing of Warren Wiersbe, I don't know what to say about you. I'm a big Warren Wiersbe fan. He is biblical. He knows how to put his Bible together, and he is simple. He is clear. And I think you should read him if you want to write well and if you want to preach well. He knows how to take profound and simplify it and make it clear and compelling. And I think he expresses that in his Psalms. Also, there is a homiletical outline in each of those Psalms that you'll benefit from. Permit me in closing to mention, I said that I took a class on the Psalms that really was revolutionary for me. That class was taught by Stephen Lawson. And the work that I have done, any blessing my people have had from my preaching through the Psalm, is inextricably tied to the teaching and to the writing of Stephen Lawson. I just have to acknowledge that. I took his class on preaching through the Psalms. I've read his book, Preaching Through the Psalms, and I've made much use of his 2-volume commentaries and the Holman on preaching through the Psalms. He has been over the years a friend to me up close and a mentor from afar. And I'm praying for him and his family and encourage you to continue to do so. So those are just some of the resources that I lean on when I am studying to teach or preach from the Psalms. Friends, what would you What's your thoughts about the list? What would you add to that list? What is your thoughts? Who are your go-to guys on the songs? I'd love to get your feedback. So friends, if you have a question or a comment about today's episode, you can reach me at hbcharlesjr.com. There you'll find show notes for this episode and other older episodes of the podcast. You can also at that site find sermon manuscripts, articles on various subjects, and other resources that may help you in your private devotions, your Bible study, or your sermon preparation. Likewise, you can find me on any of the social media platforms, being X, Instagram, or Facebook. My handle is HB Charles Jr. in all of those spaces. And friends, if you're a listener, you know what I'm about to say. If you are listening to the podcast, you should be subscribing to the On Preaching Podcast on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. If you subscribe to the podcast, you'll get an automatic download of each new episode that comes out on Mondays. And if you would like, rate, or comment on the episode, that will help others find this material, and I would consider it a personal favor. I know I talk a lot about preaching. If you want to hear some of my own expositions of God's word that I have preached to my congregation, you can look up Cutting It Straight sermons on iTunes or whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. My weekly messages from the Shiloh.Church pulpit are located there, or you can watch the video of those messages on our YouTube website. You can find us by searching Cutting It Straight. Thanks again. You've been listening to the On Preaching Podcast. For more information or resources, or to contact me, go to www.hbcharlesjr.com. I'm really excited that the second issue of the new Cutting It Straight magazine is now available. The emphasis of this particular issue is on pastoral preaching, and there are solid contributions by faithful men, as well as tools to help you in your own sermon preparation. This is a new step of faith that we are taking to serve pastors, preachers, and teachers, to help you in your handling of the word and your proclamation of the truth. Let me invite you to subscribe to the new Cutting It Straight magazine. You can do so at cismag.org. Again, that's cismag.org. I hope that you'll subscribe and tell a friend. Thanks in advance for your partnership in the gospel.